Welcome to today's Explainer. We're going to dive right into a strictly neutral, objective breakdown of a deeply complex AI-generated legal analysis. It's all about the criminal case of Dr. Chen Jingyuan. We're looking at a truly fascinating situation here. Essentially, AI models were used to perform a normative legal evaluation of the case documents, indictments, and defense materials. And by normative, I just mean they looked at how the rules should apply in theory. It's like holding up a magnifying glass to the legal framework itself.
Okay, so here's our roadmap for unpacking these pretty dense legal allegations step by step. First, the core legal conflict. Second, analyzing the picking Quarrels charge. Third, systemic procedural violations. Fourth, criminal charges against officials. Fifth, the mirror test logic. And finally, number 6, evidence and legal remedies.
Now, this brings us to a really fascinating legal puzzle. Think about it. What actually happens when a defendant turns the tables? What if they accuse the police, the prosecutors, and the judges of committing crimes during their own prosecution? Well, it's a situation that completely stresses the very fabric of any legal system. It absolutely demands an incredibly rigorous, evidence-based approach to figure out, what's a legitimate defense tactic versus what's a profound systemic failure.
Section 1. The core legal conflict. Right off the bat, the AI analysis of these case documents reveals a really stark pivot. Dr. Chen's defense totally transcends a mere denial of guilt. Instead, it directly targets the legal integrity of the prosecuting authorities themselves. So instead of just sitting there and saying, hey, I didn't do it, the defense fundamentally argues that the authorities themselves broke the law, and severely at that, in their attempt to secure a conviction. It literally changes the entire framework of the legal analysis. It's a total paradigm shift.
Section 2. Analyzing picking Quarrels.
So the absolute crucial point here is understanding Article 293 of the criminal law, which is often referred to as picking quarrels and provoking trouble. Now, for this specific charge to actually stick in a digital context, the AI notes that the law strictly requires 3 very distinct elements to be proven. First, the information has to be demonstrably fake. Second, the accused must have intentionally spread it knowing it was fake. And third, it must have actually caused a serious disruption to public order. If even one of these elements is missing, the crime just cannot be established, period.
What's super interesting about the AI's breakdown is how it flags that the original charge actually fails on all 3 of those legal prerequisites. I mean, it rightly notes that opinions just aren't facts, right? The analysis points out that Dr. Chen's content consisted mostly of art, opinions, and historical references. Those things completely lack the verifiable true or false binary that the law demands. Furthermore, the authorities presumed he had criminal intent simply because he's highly educated, but doing that completely violates the presumption of innocence. And finally, because his follower count and share metrics were actually extremely low, there's absolutely zero evidence of any actual serious social disruption.
Section 3. Systemic procedural violations.
Now we need to strictly apply an if-true framework here. Assuming Dr. Chen's materials are perfectly accurate, the AI identifies some truly massive breaches in fundamental procedural justice. And hey, it's absolutely crucial to remember that we, and the AI models for that matter, are just evaluating a set of documents. We're not declaring established facts here. But man, if these documented allegations actually turn out to be factual, the procedural breakdown is just immense.
This whole situation brilliantly illustrates the difference between substantive crimes and procedural errors. We're looking at intense allegations here, things like secret trials and entirely missing warrants. Because according to the criminal procedure law, police actually have to show a warrant to search your home, and they are legally required to notify family members of an arrest. The courts are also mandated to hold public trials, unless they're dealing with very specific exceptions, like state secrets. So if the defense was systematically restricted from presenting their case, well, those aren't just minor typos on some administrative form. They are severe deprivations of basic legal rights.
Section 4. Criminal charges against officials.
The AI models strongly agree that if these documents are factual, the actions of the officials go way, way beyond mere procedural mistakes. We're talking crossing the line into actual criminal liability. At this point, we are no longer just discussing administrative reviews. We're talking about severe penal code violations committed by the very people who took an oath to uphold the law.
When we break down the specific branches of the legal system, we can actually match their alleged actions directly with some incredibly severe penal code violations. Let's look at the police. The allegations of threats, beatings, and forced interrogations, those map directly to Article 247, extortion of a confession. Then you have the prosecutors. Taking a case to trial while openly admitting they didn't verify the evidence strongly touches on abuse of power.
And for the judges, well, knowingly convicting someone based on presumed intent rather than hard evidence, that could easily constitute unfair judgment or bending the law under Article 399.
As legal analysts, it's completely vital that we separate a simple administrative mistake, like forgetting to file a form, from an outright criminal act, like intentionally extorting a confession through violence. The AI heavily emphasizes this distinction. Missing a signature might get an officer a slap on the wrist or a reprimand, but manufacturing evidence or torturing a suspect, those are highly serious substantive crimes, and they carry very heavy prison sentences.
Now, Dr. Chen actually accuses the system of acting like a mafia. But the AI objectively steps in and points out that the legal threshold for organized crime is incredibly high. Instead, it classifies this situation as severe systemic judicial misconduct. Legally speaking, to be a true mafia or criminal syndicate, you need a very specific, stable organizational structure that's completely aimed at illegal profit. So while the alleged coordination between the police, prosecutors, and judges to force a conviction is definitely deeply alarming, the AI suggests it's much more accurately categorized as systemic judicial dysfunction and misconduct rather than, a literal mob operation.
Section 5. The mirror test logic.
This is where Dr. Chen utilizes a totally brilliant strategy called the mirror test. It's a really neat legal philosophy concept where you apply the exact same logic used by the prosecution, but you apply it directly to the prosecutors themselves. It's a classic reductio ad absurdum argument. He's essentially asking, hey, if we accept your definition of this crime, let's hold up a mirror right now and see who actually fits the description.
Think about it. If Dr. Chen is deemed guilty just for sharing unverified opinions, then officials fabricating evidence and creating massive public distrust perfectly fits the definition of causing serious social disruption, right? He argues that if posting a mildly unpopular opinion is somehow picking quarrels, then surely state authorities deliberately forging legal documents, violating established procedures, and completely destroying the public's trust in the justice system, well, that has to be the ultimate form of causing serious social disruption.
What this brilliantly illustrates is a normative critique. It really makes you question whether the law is being applied equally across the board or if it's just being selectively used as a tool. Now, the AI recognizes that this mirror test isn't necessarily a formal criminal defense. It's not going to directly put the officials in jail for picking quarrels, but instead it acts as a ridiculously powerful philosophical tool. It shines a giant spotlight on the hypocrisy and the selective enforcement of these vague catch-all laws.
Section 6. Evidence and legal remedies.
Getting into the practical side of things, the AI strongly emphasizes that accusations alone are entirely meaningless without rigorous proof. You absolutely need medical records, custody logs, and unedited interrogation videos. You can't just walk in and claim you were subjected to a secret trial or that your confession was extorted. You have to produce the actual time logs showing you were held way beyond the legal limit. You need the physical exams documenting the abuse and the unedited audio and video logs from the interrogation room. Because at the end of the day, evidence is quite literally the only currency the legal system accepts.
But here's the good news. If that evidence is secured, the system actually provides a very clear step-by-step path for a remedy. It involves initiating a retrial, seeking state compensation, and formally prosecuting those offending officials. This is exactly how the system is theoretically designed to correct itself. A higher court has to review all the procedural failures, and if they find that the conviction was indeed based on illegal evidence, it must be overturned. That leads to exoneration and subsequently holding the bad actors accountable.
Before we conclude, I really need to reiterate our absolute neutrality here. We are simply mapping out a theoretical legal brief based on the provided documents. We are definitely not endorsing any political viewpoint, and we certainly aren't declaring a final factual verdict. The AI models analyze the logic and the legal thresholds strictly based on the text they were given. So this whole explanation is really just an exploration of what if these allegations are true and how the law would actually categorize those potential truths.
As we wrap up this explainer, it really leaves us with a profound question about the very nature of justice and accountability in any legal system. When a defendant uses the logic of the prosecution to expose potential systemic misconduct, well, it forces us to ask a tough question. How do we ensure the scales of justice actually remain balanced? It's a completely fascinating look at the intersection of law, evidence, and authority. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive, and keep asking the tough questions.